Hey guys, so I have a confession to make. I have a spoiler to make. Leasing is a bad idea, and I'm going to give you a few examples as to why. Let's just cut straight to the chase. I'm going to be honest about it. A lease, especially a Tesla lease, because Tesla doesn't allow you to buy their vehicles after the lease period, at least in 2024 November, it's a glorified rental. And what do I mean by that? It's a rental in the same sense that if you were to go to Hertz or a rental company for a vehicle, it's going to be the same as though you're giving it back. You're paying a upfront charge. You're paying for additional mileage. If you plan to rent a vehicle for, a couple weeks, you might have an allotted mileage. It's the same thing with any lease, especially with Tesla. So what does that mean? Basically, it means that you're owning it. You're not even owning it. You're renting a vehicle for 3 years. You have a capped mileage, which in the case is usually about 10,000 miles a year, and you give it back. So what does that mean? It means that, okay, first off, you have no capital in the vehicle. Second off, I don't need to reiterate this, but it's a loan. You're renting the car. There's no ownership value. And so what does this mean at the end of the ownership life? It's a rental, guys. At the end of the 3 year, 36 months, typically, with money put down, let's say, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, which is pretty typical for a lease or even a trade-in. People are stupid enough to use their vehicles as trade-ins to get that monthly payment down. You get nothing back except for monthly payments, your insurance rates. Sure, there's no maintenance, but generally there's no maintenance on 3-year leases anyway. So who cares? So that's probably one of the biggest points. Another big point, and I'm not exactly biased in the fact that I haven't leased before. I made that financial mistake in my early 20s. I leased a Mercedes. I ended up losing about $35,000 on that vehicle, and I decided to not buy it out just due to a plethora of issues. But regardless, depreciation is a factor for those that purchase vehicles rather than lease. But the thing is, with a lease or a rental, you're guaranteed to lose money. You're not going to make any money. So in a lot of cases, you'll hear about your neighbor or your coworker, or your friend or colleague or whatever, and they'll lease a vehicle just to give it back in 3 years, and they'll rotate it like a phone. What's ridiculous about that is by the time, with monthly payments, the money down, insurance costs, if you want to calculate fuel into it, by the time the lease is up, you're paying as much as a gently used Honda, or in some cases a brand new vehicle, which can exceed $20,000, $30,000, just to rotate it out like a phone every 3 years. It's insane. People are insane. At least in America, this is normalized. This is ridiculous. I don't understand about leases, even though I've owned, I've leased a vehicle before. So this is not me talking out of my ass. But another thing that is just absolutely ridiculous about leases is, I'm going to piggyback on my last comment. It's a glorified rental. But you're not going to have any capital. So what does that mean for your future growth, like your welfare of yourself? Okay, so I'm going to get into finances a little bit. Not just Tesla stuff, but finances in general. And I'm going to use myself as an example, okay? Now, this is not an everybody example, but this is an example for me and people maybe in similar circumstances to me. All my life, I have progressively worked more and more towards a dream goal in terms of a vehicle. I've owned probably 20, 40 cars, somewhere between there. And a lot of these vehicles were $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 vehicles. Some of them were dream cars, what have you. But regardless, my learning lesson from all these vehicles was the majority of them are depreciating assets. Now, before anybody gets into it and says, well, Dank Rage Rants, my dude, all vehicles depreciate. That is not the case. In fact, I've made tens of thousands of dollars on appreciating vehicles, mainly right-hand drive Supras or Skylines with engines with RBs, whatever. I've made a lot of money off those vehicles. So not all vehicles are depreciating in the sense. But if you buy a modern vehicle, as long as it's not some one-off like a Bugatti or some sort of weird Ferrari, they're always going to depreciate. Almost always. Even that Subaru WRX you've been hanging on to saying, oh, it's gonna be worth something someday. No, it's not. It's gonna turn into a hunk of junk. Now back to leasing, okay? Leasing is always going to be a depreciating asset. It's always going to lose money. You're always going to lose money. And before you say, well, Dank Rage Rants. Well, if you get a luxury car, you lose 30, 40, 50% value if you buy it. Well, yeah, numbskull. It's called living life and owning things that you probably shouldn't own. Not everybody needs a luxury car. It's obvious. It's ridiculous to have that assumption that all vehicles are going to depreciate at a 50% value. But more so, it's even more ridiculous Tesla included, not as a luxury vehicle, but as a non-necessity vehicle. We're not talking about Nissan Versas right now. We're talking about vehicles that are $50, $60, $70, $80,000. Nobody needs those cars. So of course, those vehicles are going to depreciate, especially stuff with new technology and stuff. Well, Dank Radrans. Leasing saves me money because I'm not taking that financial burden. That is the stupidest logic, guys. Think about it. A lease is a rental. You get no residual back unless you buy out the vehicle, which in Teslas you can't. Okay? You're going to lose money guaranteed. Well, it's in my vehicle, which I spent about $60,000 on, okay? I know going into it, I'm going to have that depreciation curve for the next 3 years. It's probably going to be valued at $35,000 in 2027. I'm fine with that. Life is too short to give a shit. As long as you're not making frivolous, financial, stupid decisions and you have the best interest in your mind, you're not going to put yourself upside down. Okay? So I know that I'm going to lose money on this vehicle. I'm not stupid. If you're spending 60 grand, which is in most part the second biggest purchase of most people's lives, a vehicle, not the 60 grand, but a vehicle in general, you would think you would have more than 69 brain cells to rub together to figure out that, yes, you're going to lose money on vehicles 99% of the time. Now, the first biggest purchase in people's lives is, a house, but we're talking about a vehicle, something a quarter of the value of a house and sometimes half the value of a house. This is ridiculous, and people don't do research. So where am I getting at? This is going to turn into an extreme dank rage rant here before I keep going. Where am I getting at? So spent 60 grand on my Model 3 Performance, right? Cool. I know I'm going to lose money on it. But I also know, because I put almost $30,000, I put $30,000 down, that if I were to sell it right now, I might not necessarily break even, but I know in a goddamn fact in 3 years, once that curve kind of plateaus out, I can sell my vehicle and I can damn sure get probably $30,000, $35,000 straight out of the vehicle in equity. That's what's great about ownership. And not everybody has that ability to own a vehicle in terms of putting a huge amount of money down. That's not where I'm getting at. But you are always going to lose money on a fucking lease. I don't get it. Unless you can write it off, the lease off in an LLC or a business, it makes no logical sense. It doesn't. And all these people on the internet will argue, well, hey, dank rage rants, my monthly payment's lower, or my APR is really low, or they're running a special, or I have no maintenance. That's great. That's poor people logic. I'm not telling everybody they're poor, but that is the logic that Americans and worldly, just anybody in general, has a stupid inability to perceptualize or inceptualize their future, like financial ability to just keep going through life properly. A lease is something you give back. Vehicles should not be fucking cell phones. This should not be normalized. This is sickening that people have normalized vehicle trade-ins as something you just get every 3 years. It's disgusting, and it's hyper consumerism. And not only that, but it's destruction of the planet. It aids in a lot of negative fucking shit, and it's bad. It is such a bad mindset to be passing down to our kids or, the future generation. Oh, vehicles, just, every couple of years, just get a new one. It's illogical. It's stupid. And I know a lot of people aren't going to agree with me with the anti-leasing thing, but it is so fucking dumb that people come up with any excuse under the sun to normalize it or say that it's okay and it fits into their lifestyle. Guess what? If you can afford to burn 30 grand a year, or it's actually, 30 grand over the course of like 3 years. If you can afford to say, hey, yeah, you know what? I'm going to drive a vehicle that ultimately I don't give a shit about because I'm getting rid of it in 3 years. You're going to treat it like shit, and you're going to treat it like a cell phone. I think everybody that's doing that has an underlying issue. It's not the fact that you want a new vehicle. It's the fact that you've been conditioned, or preconditioned rather, to just accept that everything has a shelf life to it. And a vehicle should last 200,000-300,000 miles if taken care of well, especially a Tesla. Jesus Christ. But to think that people will literally burn money and then bitch and moan and say that they can't afford certain things. I worked my fucking ass off to be able to afford this car, to put $30,000 in cash down on this car, to bring my monthly payments down to $300 a month. I worked my fucking ass off for that. I gave up a lot of worldly, tangible physicalities to be able to have or sit in this car, to enjoy this car with other people, to allow other people to enjoy this car with me. I gave up a lot of shit to do this. And leasing is not one of those things that put me in this position. If you guys want to have a better life overall and a better car ownership experience, and you want to take pride in your belongings and actually feel successful, or rather be successful, stop fucking leasing. Stop. I could make a whole video about other dumb shit, but it's the same thing with house rentals. I could make a video on that. Be good to yourself, be good to other people, treat yourself well, treat your future better, and stop making stupid ass decisions and giving yourself reasons to make mistakes. That's all I got, guys. Dank Rage Rants out. I appreciate you guys. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. More future content along the way, especially with my Model 3 performance. I appreciate you guys, and stay safe out there.